Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another round of Coffee and Questions. And what's today's topic? Let's talk about spray guns and your setup, what you use, how you use it, and I'll try to chop this into brief sections just to give you an overview. But like I said before in all my videos, I belong to a couple of forums and a club where we demo and share, tell and share tools. Anyway, we were out at the club and I had done some research online, playing around on the forums, where somebody texted me saying, hey, how do you get your finishes to look so flat, glossy, nice? And I said, well, it's, I use, a spray gun, okay, to make a long story short. And they said, well, so do I, and this is what happens. And so I said, well, let's troubleshoot it. And so even out at the club when we were sitting around talking, the way that I approach using spray guns might be different than the way other people do. I'm just going to explain what works for me. Let's start with the beginning. Do you have an adequate compressor? Now, some people use those little pancake compressors and then they complain about them, super noisy, don't fill fast enough, and they have all these issues. Now, I have a large compressor. Mine's an Ingersoll Rand. I'll show you a picture, just an advertisement. Mine's an older one and it's gray. Okay, so you want to start off with an adequate compressor, maybe 30 gallon, 60 gallon, whatever. That would be a recommendation. You could get away with the smaller ones. I'm not saying that you can't. It's just smoother with the larger ones, that's all. So let's say that you have an adequate compressor. Okay, now the next thing is, what are you doing as far as the line itself goes? Some people buy very cheap, inexpensive air hoses. I've got a decent one. These are different upgrades I did over time. But anyway, I've got, my airlines are made by Goodyear. I get them off Amazon. Again, I'll show you a quick ad. Okay, so let's say you have an adequate air hose hooked up. Now the next step is filtration. Now mine in the shop is a little bit more elaborate. It goes through a large canister filter, and then from there it comes through another hose, and I have an inline filter before it hooks up to my spray gun. And I'm going to show you these in a second, what I mean. But you want to make sure you get condensation in those air lines, and if you don't have a way to get it out, whatever setup you choose to use, you're going to have problems when it comes to the finish, and then you're going to complain and you're going to get really about the end result. So okay, so you got an adequate compressor, you got a good air hose, you got a good way of filtering it, even if you're using the disposable filters. So then you're up to now your HVLP or whatever you're going to use. Now I'm going to show you two different ways of doing this, and there's a reason for both. One is ultra simplistic. The other is a little bit more involved, and that people at the club say, oh, it's too complex. No, it's not complex. Let me explain. Let's start off with a Harbor Freight HVLP. This one I have, it's already set up. Okay, so you have up here, you got where you're going to put your fluid and whatever else. Okay, now at the very bottom down here, there's a little knob right here. This is to adjust your air pressure. I open it up all the way for maximum air pressure because I have one of these. It's an air pressure gauge. I got it out at Harbor Freight. And it has a dial on it. This way, I have a little dial here where I can look and I can adjust and set the amount of pressure I want that's going up into the gun. It's very easy to do. Opened up all the way. You have this. Here's a knob. You can adjust your air pressure however you want, and you'll get a feel for it. We'll discuss that in a minute. Okay, what's next? Up here, I call this a fan pattern control knob. It'll tell you whether your flow pattern is narrow or whether you have a nice wide one coming out. So the way that you would do this is the more you loosen this, the larger your spray pattern. The more you tighten it, the more closed your spray pattern. Okay, not too hard, right? Okay. Now you got this one on the side. To me, it's just simply controlling the flow of your material, whether it's paint, varnish, lacquer, whatever. It controls the material coming down that is then going to be coming out. So, flow control pattern right here. I mean, this is just controlling the amount, like I said. Trying to keep it as basic as I can. The tip here, of course, you can crank it sideways, vertical, horizontal, whatever you want to do. But the big key here is you have it hooked up to an air hose and you pull the trigger and look at the pattern. Okay? And you set your pressure. I would tell you generally, okay, like on mine, I set this to probably around 24, 28, somewhere in there initially. Because you don't know, it depends on the viscosity and the thickness of what you're spraying. But I set it around there to begin with, just to start. Pull the trigger. I start to play with my flow, my pattern, okay? And then I can increase and decrease the amount of material coming out. Best way to do it is spray it against a piece of cardboard and look at it. Then start tampering with these controls. There's really not that many of them. You'll have to maybe adjust the pressure a little. You might have to adjust your fan that you want, and then the amount of material coming in and out. But if you're doing this on butcher paper or on cardboard, you're going to very quickly get an idea of how to do it. Just fill it with water and play around with it. I don't think it's that complicated. I think that people sometimes try to make things more complicated than they are. Okay, now, what's the second piece of advice? Now, I have a smaller one here. You can get them out at Harbor Freight. This one, I didn't. This one was a closeout at Lowe's. This is a Cobalt. It served me well. It's a smaller one for smaller projects, smaller amounts of fluid and what have you. This one, I told people on a previous video, believe it or not, with just a little bit of thinning, I painted my entire house and walls with this one. This was a hell of a good deal for me. Saved me a whole lot of money rather than hiring somebody. I got the time. I didn't have to do it in a day. And anyway, so that's this one. This one right here is more hobbies, projects, and stuff like that. But still, you say, well, that's a little bit bigger. And it still has the exact same controls on it. Right now, it's not set up with this, this air regulator, the pressure regulator. I mean, I would take this off and put it on here if I was going to use this. But anyway, this is these two. And it's not that complicated if you really play around with it. Before I get into the ultra simplistic way of doing this, the other thing I would tell you, and Harbor Freight sells them, you can buy accessories. Now, the one thing I would tell you, especially with these, is make sure whatever you're buying in terms of accessories, you get one that's got a spanner wrench. You're going to need it because you don't want to have to buy them off online. It tends to be a little bit more expensive. So if Harbor Freight doesn't sell them, you might want to look around online or on Amazon. I'll give you a couple examples here in a second where it comes with a cleaning kit and that spanner wrench. I mean, that's very important. Harbor Freight, I know, sells the cleaning kits. I'm not so sure about the spanner wrenches. I read a lot of complaints about people trying to take them apart and having to grind wrenches and play around in order to make their own. And you don't want to do that. It's kind of a pain. So you may look at the Amazon ones if Harbor Freight doesn't sell them, but make sure you get that spanner wrench and you get a good cleaning kit. And the reason why I tell you that, I've had these for years. And I take care of them. And the best way to do that, I have a tub here. And in this tub, I throw everything. I've got all my little cleaning kit brushes, and I got needles and all kinds of weird little things in there. And the spanner wrench is in here. Okay, that's a spanner wrench if you're not sure. All right, let me give you an example. Let's say I'm spraying lacquer and I'm done for the day. Or it's getting pluggy and it's not acting right. In this big container I have, I have lacquer thinner. I put it about halfway. I take the gun all apart. I put all the pieces in there. I got my brushes. I scrub them all up and I play around, and then I put it all back together and it sprays perfectly fine again. Now I'm at the end of the day. At the end of the day, I take this thing all apart. I clean it all very, very well. And then I'm ready to put it away. And then I know it will be ready the next time. You have to clean these real well. It'll prevent you a whole bunch of problems. Now, make sure you get the cleaning kit. Like I said, you can buy other accessories. This is like a little stand. I think Harbor Freight sells these, where the spray gun can actually just sit in here like this. You can unscrew the top, fill it with stuff, whatever. So, not a necessity, but kind of handy to have. Now, let's go on to the very simple way to do this. I have projects that don't even require this smaller HVLP. And everybody says it's too much of a hassle. After you tear this thing apart a few times and clean it and put it back together, I can, within like 5 minutes, if there's a problem in my spraying, I picked up a contaminant or something, I can very quickly tear this down, put it back together in a matter of minutes. It does not take long if you have things set up. The other thing I'll tell you is make sure that you filter the material that you're going to put into one of these. Okay, there's paper filters. Harbor Freight sells them. You can buy them online when you buy your disposable inline filters or whatever you're going to do. But you always want to filter your material. And like I said, you might have to thin it a little bit. I buy lacquer sometimes and I'll add lacquer thinner to it. And I can pretty much tell by, just dipping something in there and looking at how it runs off that I've got it really close to the viscosity that I want. You'll get an idea for it, and there's plenty of formulas and plenty of suggested advice online, and it depends on how much you're using material-wise, how much you want to thin. Anyway, all right, so that's those. Let's talk about a method that is super simple, I think. Now, I have wood turning projects. Those are small ones where on my wood lathe I'll make bowls, I'll make vessels, and they're small. And I don't really need all that lacquer mixed up and to use it. So, okay, I don't. I have what I've had, and I'll show you the advertisement of a previous purchase. I think it was in 2014 or something. I have this, and I'll show you the advertisement off Amazon. This is called a Badger single action sprayer. It's just real simple. You put material in here, which isn't a lot. You can thin it, filter it, do whatever you want. You put the material in here. It's got one screw up here on the tip. You can screw it down, which will lessen the amount of material, or you can turn around and you can open it up, which will give you this kind of broad pattern. Okay, now this works good for me on small projects. And the air hose set up to it, which is right here, and I'm going to put some stuff in it in a minute and show you what I mean. I have it around 2022, and again, this depends on each one of your air compressors, but you can adjust the pressure setting and push this. Is it coming out way too hard and forceful, or is it coming out nice and smooth and easy? That's what you need to determine, and then you can play around with that pressure adjustment knob until it's like it's coming out with a nice pattern. And I very simply using this, once I have my pattern and I've tested it on cardboard or butcher paper, I'm ready to go to my project, okay? And then I turn around and I spray this, and I overlap at about 50%. And I go, let's say it's lacquer, and I go around that project one time, I leave it alone, I set this over to the side. Now I might have a little bit more mixed up and ready to go to put into this small container. But now I'm not having to worry about wasting a lot of material or time or anything like that. And what I like about lacquer, and I've told you in previous videos, I prefer it really over varnish. I have wood, let's use mesquite as an example. It's porous, but I want to fill in those pores. Now, there's lots of sanding sealers, and you can use shellac and everything else. I've done all of those things, and they all work perfectly fine. But I can spray this. I can wait, like let's say an hour, maybe less, and I can knock it down, and I can spray on another coat, and then I wait an hour and I can knock it down. Lacquer, that first coat, I put on the second one, and the third and the fourth and the fifth. Each coat, let's just say it burns into the previous coat, and that's what I like about lacquer. And I can build up as many coats as I want in order to create the finish that I want. And that's the reason for using lacquer. But we're back to the spray gun. Fast and easy to clean up. When I'm done, I take the air hose off. I sink the whole thing down into, like, let's say lacquer thinner. I use a brush, I clean it up. Right here, where the material comes up and out of, there's a little siphon tube in here. I clean all of those parts. I use a needle that I have that goes up and down through here very easily. I clean it up super well. I let it air dry. I put it together, put it back on the shelf. We're good to go. Let me show you this in action and we'll wrap this up and I'll be right back. Okay, I just put water in here for the heck of it. And you can see when I push the trigger, that's coming out a little bit too forceful, let's say. I would turn, you know, the pressure down a little bit so I have like a smoother, but this is just water that's in there. That wasn't good for my computer screen. Anyway, I'll wipe it off. It'll help clean it up. So this is real handy. The other thing I would tell you is it originally comes with this cheap, flimsy plastic hose. You can use it for a while. Get yourself a good braided hose. It's not that, this is not that expensive, the Badger. The hose is definitely not expensive. Get an inline filter, get the few things that, you know, that I mentioned. Even with this, when I'm done, I just turn around, like I said, I clean it up super well. I hang it up. I don't worry about it until the next project. It's all in a matter of how you set this up. And somebody said, well, like I told you, why do your finishes, you know, come out so great? Okay, that's not always the truth. I mean, there are sometimes I've had problems in the finish. Sometimes it's the material itself, which I didn't like. I use Watco lacquer, whether it's a semi-gloss or the gloss, but there are plenty of good products out there. Deft is another one that I use, and somebody made the comment, it's a little beyond the scope of talking about sprayers, right? But, you know, with Watco, I can thin it myself to whatever I want. If you cut it 50-50, you're almost making it brushing lacquer, but if you go to Deft and you get brushing lacquer, they said you can't spray it. No, that's what they tell you, but the answer is yes, you can spray it. I've taken it right out of the can and put it into one of these Badgers, and it sprays fine. Okay, nothing wrong with it. Try it, you'll see what I mean. If you want to spray varnish, shellac, whatever you want. These little hobby sprayers are very handy, and I don't have to, you know, use one of the bigger ones. But again, it depends on the projects that you're doing. So those are my thoughts on all of this and the spray gun. It is not a complicated thing. Whether you use the little one or the big one, it's not complicated once you play around with it and the settings. You got a few more settings on the bigger ones. You got one right here on this one. A lot of material, not so much material by tightening it. Adjust your air pressure, you're ready to go. On these, you'll play around with them a little bit more. Butcher paper, cardboard, like I keep saying over and over, you can't beat it to take a look at the pattern and how forceful is it coming out. Adjust your pressure, play around with it, and this becomes a really fun tool to have in your shop. Okay, folks, I'm the Home Handyman. I hope you click subscribe, keep following me. You got any other suggestions? Drop it in the comment below. All links for the things that I talked about will be in the description. I would encourage whatever you get, make sure, like on the bigger ones, you're getting that spanner wrench, okay? That you need that. If you call, you know, Harbor Freight even, they're not going to have one. So calling them isn't going to do you any good. So make sure that they either have one or you have one before you get one of these. I had one, so it wasn't a big deal, okay? But for you, it could be, you're going to find it to be a pain when you need to take it apart. This, very simple, straightforward. You folks have a great day. Well, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.